Today, we live in a time where people in their 20s and 30s are increasingly burdened by this deep sense of purposelessness. It's like they're stuck in a crisis of identity and meaning. When you go on YouTube, you can see millions of people are searching for videos with titles like, "I'm lost in my 20s," or "My dream life doesn't make me happy anymore." And on top of that, rates of anxiety, depression, and identity-related disorders have skyrocketed. And the thing is, this isn't just affecting a minority of people. It's affecting the vast majority of adults in their 20s and 30s. Data from multiple surveys shows this pattern. Between the ages of 20 and 24, about 59% of adults experience some form of identity crisis. And as the years goes on, that number keeps rising, peaking at age 27, where 75% of adults report being in an identity crisis. It starts to taper down between the ages of 30 to 34, but the number still stays around 50%. What people report is most disturbing about this is not the sense that they've changed, but it's this slow realization that you never truly knew who you were to begin with. It's like the entire structure of your identity and your reality starts to feel fake. You feel stuck, not just in your job or your relationships, but in your own body. It's like your life has become a prison and somehow you're the one that built it. And of course, the typical advice starts rolling in, like just work harder or push through or discipline equals freedom. But what if this isn't just a burnout or just a weak mindset that's causing this? What if what's really going on is actually pointing to something much deeper, like a shift in how we use different parts of our brains, where some parts become overdeveloped and others are left behind? To understand how we've got here, we've got to take a step back and look at how fast the world has changed, way faster than our minds were designed to keep up with. For most of human history, people lived in these small, stable communities. A long time ago, you most likely spent your entire life in the same village that you were born in. You worked alongside your parents, you learned from the elders, your role in the tribe or the village or the family was clear, and your identity was rooted in a rich tradition or a shared story that was passed down through generations. But in the last few hundred years, and especially the last few generations, the systems that society runs on, like education, media, social media, and even language itself, have started shaping not just what we think, but how we think. So back then, life was slower, everything was more local, and who you were wasn't someone that you had to figure out. Nowadays, we live in these huge cities full of strangers, working jobs that exist entirely on screens. Then in our spare time, we scroll endlessly through feeds of other people's highlights that are showing us unlimited different options. And over time, that way of living might be rewiring how our brains work. So to understand what I mean by that, we have to zoom out and take a deeper look at the design of the brain. And this idea first hit me when I was reading a book by the psychiatrist Dr. Iain McGilchrist called The Master and His Emissary. And the book completely changed how I understood the brain. Most people think that the brain works as some unified single self that's making decisions, but that's not really the case. The brain has two hemispheres, left and right, that process the world in fundamentally different ways. They're both always active, but they have very different experiences of reality. The left hemisphere is the part of you that analyzes the world. It uses language, logic, and it focuses on structure and rules and measurable goals. This is the part that talks to yourself. It's the inner narrator, that voice inside of your head. On the other side, we have the right hemisphere, which works in a very different way. It doesn't just break the world down into pieces. It takes it all in as a whole. It sees all the connections instead of the categories. It's more tuned to the body, to the present moment, and the things that you can't easily put into words. Instead of being about analysis, it's more about direct experience. So it doesn't think about the world, it feels it, it senses it, and it lives in it. So imagine listening to one of your favorite songs, and there's that one part that you love. Whenever it happens, you don't sit there and think, this is the part with the nice chord progression. You just feel it, you're just there. There's kind of a unity with the moment, and if someone asked you to explain why it hit so hard, you probably couldn't. You just know. That's the right hemisphere. So the core difference between the hemispheres is the left side thinks about the world in parts, and the right side experiences it as a whole. So by understanding the basics of these two differences, you can start to get one of the core reasons why so many people feel disconnected from themselves today. Because more and more, our sense of identity is being shaped by the left hemisphere's way of thinking. We build an image of who we are not from what we've actually experienced, but from the categories we were taught growing up, and the expectations that are reinforced by modern life, by social media feeds, self-improvement culture, branding, and this pressure to always perform a version of yourself for others. So over time, you end up building up this identity that's a performance based on this internal model of who you're supposed to be, not who you really are. So to understand how this disconnect happens, we need to look back at how identity used to form throughout most of human history and how that process has radically changed over the last few generations. So for most of human history, identity wasn't something that you had to figure out. It was something that you inherited. You were born into a tribe, a family, a culture, and your role was shaped by necessity, by what your community needed, and by the stories that were passed down through generations. This means that your sense of self wasn't an abstract idea. It was intertwined with your land and your people and the rituals that they had. And you were someone because you belonged to something greater than yourself. But in the last few hundred years, and especially in the last few generations, something fundamental about that has shifted. The old foundations of identity like tradition, community, religion, and family roles all have weakened, and in their place, we've been given this new model, which is the self as a project. Instead of being someone because you belong to a community, you're told to become someone by achieving and performing, which leaves people searching for some kind of foundation that isn't actually there. So now, instead of inheriting who we are from a place of belonging, we're told to go out there and to build it. But when there's no clear answer to that question of who am I and where do I belong, most people look around to their peers or to their role models, and they start piecing together a version of themselves from the outside in, which means borrowing all the traits and values and goals from whatever seems to work. And over time, these external influences mix together, making this internal blueprint of the kind of person we think we should be, a version of ourselves that lives the right kind of life. There's a well-known psychologist named Carl Rogers that called this the ideal self. It's a mental model of who you think you should be, and aligns almost perfectly with how the left hemisphere of your brain operates, which is focused on abstraction, structure, ideas, logic, and not embodied experience. So the ideal self can take on many different forms. It's basically any version of you that exists in your imagination of who you think you're supposed to be. So maybe in your mind, the ideal version of you wakes up early, crushes deadlines, eats clean, journals, meditates, exercises, invests in the stock market, hits all these career goals, and does everything perfectly. But it doesn't just have to be some kind of extreme stereotypical thing. For some people, it might be more subtle. Maybe it's just being the version of you that your parents said you should be. The responsible one, the one who goes to college and settles down and starts a family and lives the quiet, simple life. Whatever form it takes, that ideal self can turn into this quiet ruler of your entire life. Because what happens is you start measuring everything that you do against this image of who you think you should be. Whenever real life doesn't match it, you feel like you are the problem. But it's also important to understand that this concept of an ideal self isn't a negative thing that you should try to get rid of. It's actually a necessary part of a healthy mind, and it's kind of obvious if you think about it. If you didn't have the ability to reflect on your past or imagine some kind of future or compare yourself to others in some kind of useful way, you'd just be stuck in the moment, repeating the same mistakes, unable to learn or grow. So this ability to simulate possibilities and to ask yourself, what kind of person could I become, is part of what pushes people forward. So for example, a kid might see an older sibling playing the piano, and he imagines himself doing that at some point too. Or someone fails at something and imagines a better version of themselves that doesn't make that same mistake. You picture yourself 5 years from now, wiser and more capable, and that image is what helps you move forward. The problem is, because of how quickly society has changed, and now we're faced with all these endless comparisons and expectations, we're not building an identity from the inside out. We're building it from the outside in. So what we're doing is we're taking a mixture of other people's ideas and opinions and popular trends and making a kind of abstract mental model of this idealized identity that only exists in our head or online or somewhere out there. And the more that we chase that image without spending the time it takes to actually know ourselves, the more we feel that sense of disconnection. Like I said earlier, for most of human history, people lived in these small communities. Life was embodied, it was relational, and identity came from this shared sense of meaning that was passed down through tradition and story and lived experience. But in the last few centuries, and especially since the Industrial Revolution, that started to change. The education systems that we're brought up in now weren't designed to develop self-awareness, but to make a compliant, standardized worker, someone that could fit into the machine of society and just follow orders. And in the last few decades especially, this factory worker model has just been expanded digitally. So the more connected that we get, the more versions of success that we're shown. And this means that we're not just comparing ourselves to our neighbors and classmates like before. We're comparing ourselves to everyone, everywhere, all the time. And we're fed this nonstop stream of idealized standards of beauty and success and wellness, each one teaching you that this is what you should be. So it's like from the time we're born, we're put on a kind of psychological assembly line. We move from birth to school to integration with society, absorbing all these thousands of unspoken rules of how to look, of how to act, of what to want. And without realizing it, you end up carrying the weight of all these expectations that you never chose. And I think that this is one of the main root causes of this crisis of identity. It's why so many people are feeling lost and disconnected and unsure of who they really are. So now the big question is, what's the way out of this? And the answer is that it's not about chasing some better version of yourself. It's about letting go of the projections altogether and letting go of that pressure to become someone that you never chose to be. And that starts with slowing down enough to notice what's actually true to you. It's about reorienting your life and goals to be congruent with what Carl Rogers called the real self. So what is the real self? The real self is what's left whenever you take away all the roles and the labels and the images that you were told to become. It's the literal lived experiences that shaped how you see the world. Like how you felt whenever your mom snapped at you when she was stressed, or when you were picked first at recess or picked last, or how you started to believe something about yourself based on one comment from your third grade teacher. Each one of us has a unique pattern of moments like these that cause us to filter what we notice. And that starts to form this lens that you experience the world through, and it changes how you use your attention. That's why two people can sit through the exact same movie at the exact same time and walk out with two completely different versions of what they just saw. Because in a sense, they weren't watching the same story. They were each watching their own interpretation of the story through their own lens. So while it might seem like we're all living in the same reality, we're actually not. Each of us is living in our own filtered version. And over time, this creates something like this internal maze made of all these mental boundaries that shape the direction that we go in life. So here's an example of what I mean by that. I remember whenever I was a kid, I used to play in the sandbox in the backyard, and I spent all this time carving out these little channels and trenches in the sand, and then I'd grab the hose and watch the water run through the maze that I made, and it always followed that same path. Obviously, the water didn't have a plan, it just followed the direction created by those grooves that I made. So just like that example of the sand, your life starts to follow these grooves that were built by your past experiences. The way that your parents responded to you whenever you spoke up, or the way that your teacher praised you for staying quiet. All these made you learn what was safe and what wasn't, and without realizing it, these moments taught you which parts of yourself to hide and which parts of yourself to express. So if you step back and really think about it, all these things that have happened to you have engineered your life to be pointing towards some direction. Not because you sat down and planned it, but because the path was shaped by everything that came before. This means that each of us is living our lives quietly guided by our own internal compass that's always pulling you towards some kind of future. And every decision that you make in the present moment is influenced by this. So think about it. You might wake up one day and decide, I should start going to the gym. So you do. You sign up, you go. And if someone asks you why, you might say something like, well, I wanted to be healthier. But ask a deeper question. Why did you want to be healthier? Well, it's like, I wanted to feel better in my body. Well, why did you want to do that? Well, maybe it's so I can feel more confident or more attractive or something. Okay, why is that important to you? And now you're kind of climbing this invisible staircase of reasons, and at each step, the answer gets a little less clear, a little more abstract. Maybe at the top of the staircase, there's something like, I want to be happy, or I want to feel like I'm becoming the kind of person I was meant to be. But we never really go that far when we decide to do something. There's just this sense. It's like something inside of you is pulling you towards a direction, even if you don't know what the end goal is. So if you want to reconnect with your real self and begin to shape a life around what's actually meaningful to you, then you have to figure out what you're aiming at underneath it all. So that brings up the question, how do you figure out what your internal compass is pointing to in life? And the answer is that it's found in figuring out what you actually do in the real world. This means you have to start observing your life almost like a stranger would. You have to step back and look at yourself objectively. What do you spend your time on when no one's watching? What do you spend your money on without questioning it? What fills your physical space in your room or in your desk or at work? What kind of conversations make you light up where you suddenly come alive? For example, maybe you find yourself always having these deep conversations about mental health, or you're the one that people always come to for advice. Or maybe you stay up really late editing videos or sketching ideas or researching some obscure subject. And not because anyone told you, but because you actually just can't help but to do it. That's your internal compass guiding you towards some kind of direction in life. And the thing is, these patterns are unique to you. They're not just random habits. They're actions that you're taking that have been shaped by your past. You could think of it as the echoes of your most meaningful moments in the past that are showing up in the present as some sort of invisible gravity that's pulling you. And until you figure out what those things are that actually matter to you, you'll keep feeling stuck and caught in this loop of disconnection because some part of you is always trying to guide you back to your real self. So with all that said, I want to give you something practical. I want to give you an exercise that can help you start to uncover what your internal compass is actually pointing you towards. The full instructions are down below in the description, but here's how it works in a nutshell. You'll answer a series of questions that'll help you notice what is actually important to you. Not what you think is important or what you wish that you cared about, but what is actually showing up in your actions day to day. And once you've answered those questions, you'll start to spot these patterns. And these patterns indicate what your highest priorities are in different parts of your life. From there, you'll have these themes, and you can organize them from the highest to the lowest priority. And this will show you what truly matters to you right now. And if you take a step back and look at everything that we've explored here, it starts to become a little more clear. This identity crisis that so many people are feeling right now is just the natural outcome of a world that trained us to build ourselves from the outside in, instead of discovering who we really are from the inside out. We've been taught to chase these ideals, to optimize every moment and perform this version of ourselves, all while ignoring the deeper signals that have been guiding us the whole time. That split between the ideal self and the real self, between who you think you're supposed to be and who you really are, that's what creates the disconnection. But once you start tuning in to your own unique internal compass, you gain this deep sense of true direction. And this gives you a real blueprint to build your own life on. Okay, that's all for today, my friends. If you're enjoying this content, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to my channel. Feel free to like and comment with any questions that you have. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram, which is the same name as this YouTube channel. It's @TheAaronMorris. And I'll see you guys next time.